Hello, everyone, and welcome to another True Crime Tuesday. I literally just finished recording this video, and while I was editing, noticed that my whole front teeth were stained with lipstick. So I hope that's not the case. Like when I checked the mirror, it wasn't there, and I was like, where did that even come from? So I hope it's not like a stain on my camera. But anyway, re-recording it. So today I'm going to be covering the case of Shashia Moreau. This happened in Belgium. The trial concluded at the end of 2019. It is a solved case. I researched this a while back, but felt that there wasn't much information out there for me to cover. But since it happened in Belgium, I still wanted to cover it anyway. So yeah, let's just get into it. So today I'm going to be talking about Shashia Moreau, or as it's also called in Belgium, the Pokemon murder. So Shashia Moreau was 20 years old when she went missing on February 7th of 2017. She lived in a town called Hest op den Berg, which is about half an hour outside of Antwerp City. Antwerp is incidentally also where I'm from. And from a very young age, she was crazy about Pokemon. I'm sure you all know what Pokemon is. It's on TV. It's various games. Around this time in 2017, Pokemon Go was really big, where you play it on your phone and go out to catch as many Pokemon as you could. And she would go to conventions for this. She would cosplay. She was just a huge fan. And she also collected Pokemon figurines, which, like, some of them were worth up to €500. I mean, I even see that sometimes with the Legend of Zelda figurines, that they are hundreds of euro. I think every time you have merchandise of a really popular franchise, it's just really expensive. She was very much an introvert. She wasn't a super social person. She wasn't really interested in dating. She she was a quiet girl who kept to herself, and she worked at an indoor playground, which Belgium has a lot of. It is literally what it says. It is a playground inside a big hall where you can take your kids to in the winter. So on this day, on February 7th, she took the train to Antwerp City to meet up with a guy she met on Facebook called Johnny van den Broek. He was 25 years old, and they met in a Facebook group about Pokemon. Several Pokemon fans. I think she'd been a member of that group for a while, and he had a big collection of Pokemon figurines, which she did as well. She was trying to collect, as many as she could, and he had some that she didn't have, and vice versa. So they met up to go to his apartment, and she could look at his collection, and they would do a trade. So they were supposed to meet around 10 a.m. at Antwerp Central Station, but according to Johnny, she didn't show up. Around 11 a.m., he sent her a few messages on Facebook asking where she was, and at 12 p.m. she answered, saying that she had eventually decided not to come. She was also supposed to meet up with a friend in Antwerp afterwards, and she sent him the same message on Facebook. So around 2:30 p.m., he decided to meet up with a friend in town, do a bit of shopping, hang out, and he didn't hear from her again after that. Her parents had seen these messages on her Facebook and were really concerned because it wasn't like Shashia to change her plans and not tell her family about them. That's not what she did. So they tried calling her a few times, but it always went straight to voicemail, and eventually when she didn't show up that evening for dinner, they called police to report her missing. Police, of course, immediately went to Johnny's house because that's who she was supposed to meet up with. But he told them that she had told him that she wasn't gonna come and that he hadn't heard from her at all anymore that day. So police questioned her family and friends to, get a bit more information on what kind of person she was and if there was anything out of the ordinary about her in the last couple of days. And eventually the cell of missing persons became involved, which meant extra resources for the investigation. The cell of missing persons in Belgium handles only missing persons cases, as it's in their name. I mentioned them before on that video I did of the 3 different cases in Belgium. I'll link it. And Liam van den Brande, who is a little boy. I think the cell was founded in like 96 or 97 after the Mark Dutroux case, which I'll mention a little bit later on. And Liam, the child who went missing around that time, is to date the only missing persons case in Belgium that has not been solved. Reported missing persons cases, I might add, that organization got involved in. They've been able to solve every missing persons case since then, except for that one, which I think is pretty impressive. So with them involved, they could allocate more resources to find her, and 2 days later, on February 9th, they decided to look at CCTV footage to see where she went that day. So they saw her on camera leaving her house. Then they saw her at her local train station, and they saw her getting off the train at Antwerp station. However, they saw her leaving the train station with Johnny, who claims that she never showed up and he didn't hear from her for the rest of the day. So they went back to his house with a search warrant, and they noticed that he had an injury on his hand, but he wouldn't tell them where he got it from. He just kept beating around the bush. So the CCTV footage combined with his evasive answering of the hand injury gave them enough cause to arrest him, at the very least, on suspicion of kidnapping. They at this point didn't know where Shashia was or what happened to her, but they brought him in for questioning. However, they didn't have much to hold him on to tie her to her disappearance. I mean, again, they didn't know where she was. They couldn't conclude that he had, taken her home. They could only see that he left the station with her. However, at this time, they were also still conducting a search of his house, and it is there, unfortunately, in his backyard, that in a shallow grave they found the body of Shashia Moreau. She was tied by her hands and feet, and it became apparent very quickly that she had died a violent death. So, police then rearrested Johnny on suspicion of murder, but during his interrogation, he claimed amnesia. He said that he didn't remember anything that happened that day. It was a complete blank for him, which really, really complicated the investigation because he would not cooperate in the least, claiming that he just didn't remember what happened. So they looked at CCTV footage to see where he had gone during the day. Now, like I mentioned, around 2:30 p.m. he met up with a friend, and CCTV footage shows them in a store called MediaMarkt. I'm sure a lot of people in Europe know what MediaMarkt is. For those who don't, in the US and Canada, I think you have it too. It's like comparable. It's like a mix, I would think, between a Best Buy and a Target. In Ireland, it's like a Harvey Norman. It's basically a big electronic store that sells household appliances, anything from mobile phones, DVDs, and just some household things. It's a little bit of everything, but it's mostly electronics and DVDs and stuff like that. And it's cheaper than other stores, so it's a very popular place to go. So the camera shows him chatting to his friend for a while, and then it also shows him buying a shovel, and then he goes back home. Noted on this footage, he's wearing a different sweater than he was when he picked up Shashia, and he did not have any injury to his hand. But then on CCTV footage around 4 p.m., he is seen taking a tram to a nearby town where he worked at McDonald's, and on the platform of the tram, you can see that he is standing there with a bleeding hand and that he is holding a tissue against his hand. And his work said that he used the first aid kit to patch up the wound on his hand. Police also found bloodstains on his mattress, which looked like they had been attempted to be cleaned up. And they also found a tuft of Shashia's hair between the fitted sheet and the mattress. So at this point, he said, "Oh no, I actually did something to her from the sounds of it." But he still claimed amnesia. He said afterwards that the wound on his hand must have come from when he used the shovel to bury her, but he couldn't remember if he did that before or after he went to work, which makes no sense because his hand was bleeding before, but he claims no memory of anything. His trial started in 2019, and for those 2.5 years between when it happened and the start of the trial, he maintained this amnesia story and claims he didn't remember anything. But then on the first day of his trial, he magically remembered, and he told the judge what, according to him, happened. So he said that on that morning, Shashia had sent him a text that she was running a little late, that her train would be arriving late into the station. You know, she was a nice girl. She paid him a courtesy and was like, "Hey, train's arriving a little bit late." And he replied and said, "I'm going to punish you for that," but with a very sexual undertone, which she picked up on and immediately replied and said she was not interested in that. She was not there for that. She only wanted to look at his Pokemon figurines and nothing else. So then she arrived and they went over to his apartment together. While she was looking at his collection, he suddenly grabbed her butt. He said that she initially was startled because she had made it clear to him that she wasn't interested in that, but then he kissed her, and according to him, she kissed him back. Things then started to heat up. They went to his bedroom together, and they started having sex, which according to him, again, was completely consensual. It got rougher and rougher, and at some point he strangled her in a sexual way and didn't notice that she had stopped breathing and that she died. And so he panicked and didn't dare to call police because he thought nobody would believe his story. So he decided to get rid of the body. It took just 21 minutes between him picking her up at the train station and her dying, which does not sound accidental to me, but you know. He then quickly tried to establish an alibi for himself by sending her all these messages on Facebook claiming he was worried, and then he used her phone to reply to his messages to her to say that she decided not to come, and then he also used her phone to send a message to her friend. The whole meeting up with his friend was also to establish an alibi and going to work to prove to police that he had a normal day and that nothing special happened. Several female witnesses came forward saying that he had also contacted them via this Facebook group, inviting them to come to his apartment to look at his Pokemon collection. And one woman even said that he offered her €500 if she would sleep with him. A medical examiner determined that Shashia's cause of death was strangulation, but he couldn't determine if it had been done by hand or by an object. However, Johnny's ex-girlfriend testified that he owned a beaded S&M collar that he used to use a lot while they were a couple. So a lot of people think that's what he used to strangle her with. However, police were unable to find it anywhere, and the medical examiner couldn't determine what caused her death eventually. He also said, the medical examiner, that she had some bruising on her thighs, which could indicate that she was raped. But again, he couldn't 100% sure say that's what happened, so they couldn't use that as evidence against him in court. So the court ordered Johnny to get a psychiatric evaluation. He was evaluated by 3 separate psychiatrists, and they diagnosed him with a narcissistic and psychopathic personality disorder. They said that he had no concept of boundaries and that he would do this again. I also recently researched a case for my Patreon where the killer had a was a psychopath, and I found there, and I did not know this, that being a psychopath is not considered a mental illness. I always thought it was, because you're born a psychopath. Like, there's something in your brain that makes you have no empathy for anyone, and that makes them be able to kill so easily because they don't care. But apparently that doesn't stop you from knowing right from wrong. And if you are a psychopath, it will not get you a lesser sentence because it is not actually considered a mental illness, which I thought was interesting. So on October 25th of 2019, just 1 week after the trial started, the jury found him guilty. They didn't believe his story. They didn't believe that she would willingly have sex with him and that it went wrong, because that's not the type of girl that she was. And he was eventually sentenced to life in prison with 15 years of staying available to the court. The staying available to the court, I had to look into exactly what that means. From what I understand, in Belgium, you usually only serve a third of your sentence. In most cases. I don't really know how they determine how long that is with a life sentence. My guess is that it has something to do with your age. Like, he was 27, I believe, when he got convicted. Let's say that they assume the end of his life would be 90, because you have to determine how long someone's going to live, which I think is weird. Let's say they take 90. For him, that would have been just over 60 years. So a third of his sentence would have been around 20 years. I think most people with a life sentence are considered to have served a third after about 25 years. And at that point, he could get released. Once you are allowed to apply for parole in Belgium, it can get rejected, but you can reapply for it every year. So what this staying available to the court thing does is that if you are early released, you have to stay under supervision for another 15 years, whether that is in an institute that gives you more freedom or whether that's at home. But you get something like a parole officer, like someone that you have to check in with. You're not allowed to leave the country, like a lot of restrictions on your freedom, where they can really keep an eye on you and make sure that you don't commit another crime. Her lawyer said that this was an unusually heavy sentence for something like this, because Mark DeTrue, the guy I mentioned before, and I will do a video on him, I promise. It's just such a big case. There's so much information in it, and I really want to do it justice. I might do it for when I reach 10,000 subscribers or something, because it's so big. But he was a pedophile who raped and killed multiple young girls. He was sentenced to life in prison with 10 years of staying available to the court. I honestly can't see him ever getting released. But it's Belgium. His 2 companions have been released since. One was Jew, one had a 20-year sentence or something, and he was coming to the end of it. But then his wife was also released, which caused a huge commotion. So I'm not saying he's never going to get released, although I somehow doubt it. But her lawyer said that for someone who only had one victim, this was an extremely high sentence, according to the Belgian justice system. I do want to touch a little bit on that text he sent. I do wonder a little bit why she didn't just run. Like, if that guy, if I was meeting up, first of all, I would never meet up with a guy from Facebook that I don't know. But I'm in my late 30s. She was 20, you know? You see the world different when you're 20. And I understand fandoms better than anyone. I have a lot of them. We all know how much I love Harry Potter. She loved Pokemon so much. I think she was just excited to complete or add to her collection of Pokemon figurines. But if that guy replied to her that she would be punished for being late, and she obviously knew what that meant because she replied to it, like, I would have just gotten off the train and gotten straight back on it and gone home. But she was an introvert, not a very social person. I don't think necessarily knew how people could be. And let's be honest, I don't think you ever expect this to happen to you. I mean, Belgium is not like a super safe country. It's also not a place where murders happen all the time. Like, I mean, this was a case that rocked Belgium. It's not something that people expected to just happen. So I think you just don't think about stuff like that happening to you. And let's be honest, he's the reason she's dead. You know, she did nothing wrong. I think just her good nature and her believing in the goodness of other people, in the end, ended up wrong for her, because I think she just assumed that if she told him honestly that she wasn't interested in that he was a good enough person to just leave it at that, and he obviously wasn't. So, yeah, I feel really bad for her that it's very often the people who only see the good in others that end up the victims of something like this. So that is it for this case. Thank you as always so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video.